So you've already written your introduction where you've hooked the reader, you've given them a summary of the book, you've said what your opinion is, you have given 3 reasons, and for each reason, you have given evidence from the book that shows an example of it. So all that we have left is today we are going to write a quick conclusion at the end, and then we're going to do everyone's favorite part, going back to revise and edit our work. Before we remind ourselves what revising and editing looks like, I wanted to quickly share with you a couple students' writing. And the reason I wanted to show you their writing is because they did a great job of organizing it into paragraphs. So this is Mason's writing, and I want you to notice how he has separate paragraphs for his introduction, each of his reasons, and he has an indent to show where those paragraphs start. Sharia also organized his writing into paragraphs and has his indents. And I'm also noticing there are transition phrases like the first reason, another reason, and the final reason. So they were not the only ones who did these things, but I just picked a couple to show as examples that you can get ideas from, because we can always learn from each other. And in the future, I'll share some other friends' writing as well. So looking at our checklist, since we've already done the introduction, given our first, second, and third reason paragraphs, we're going to scroll down, and we're here at, does my conclusion restate my opinion? So we're writing a conclusion at the end. It just kind of wraps up your piece. And remember, in Oreo, the reason there's that final O is in the end, you need to restate or say your opinion again. So this doesn't have to be very long. Looking at the piece that I wrote with Miss Chambers, we just wrote at the end, I think you should read the book Days with Frog and Toad because of all the reasons I explained. Happy reading. Now, when we restate our opinion, make sure you're saying the full name of the book. So don't just say you should read this book. Since we're restating our opinion again at the end, we want to make sure we're saying the full title of the book. And as a reminder, over here where it says conclusion, you don't need that. I have written that to show you in my example where the conclusion is, but you don't need to write that word conclusion there. You just need to say your opinion again. If you want to use the word conclusion as a transition phrase, you are welcome to do that, and you could write, in conclusion, I think you should read the book so-and-so. So that's different, but you don't need to write it up here as a heading like I did for the example. Before we move on to editing, I want to remind you that revising is different from editing. So before you get to editing or you're checking spelling and punctuation, you want to use the top part of this checklist, all of this, to make sure your writing has all the parts that it needs. So revising is when you go back and you see if you need to add in anything, or maybe even take some things out that aren't necessary, or change things. So if you're checking your introduction, you're like, okay, did I hook the reader? Yeah. Oh, wait, I didn't give a summary of the book. You would revise by adding in a couple sentences about what your book is about. I hope you didn't forget to say your opinion, but if you did, revise and write that in. But the checklist is to help you make sure you have all the parts. If you're noticing you forgot to use transition phrases, that's something you can revise and just add in. If you would like to use a different color, pen, marker, crayon, whatever, to edit and revise, it'll help me see what you're going back and adding or changing. To practice editing, we're going to read this short passage about Mother's Day, which is coming up May 10th. So when we're editing, we're checking for a couple of things. We're checking to make sure we have correct punctuation at the ends of our sentences, whether that's a period, exclamation mark, or question mark. And we're checking to make sure that the correct letters are capitalized. So the only letters that should be capitalized are the first word at the beginning of a sentence. The first letter needs to be capitalized. Names need to be capitalized, whether it's a person or place, and I by itself need to be capitalized. So those are the only words that need to be capitalized. If you're reading over your writing and you have a random word in the middle of your sentence that's not a name, it's capitalized, you need to lowercase it. If there's a word at the beginning of the sentence that is not capitalized, then you do need to capitalize that word. So with this passage, let's start with checking for punctuation at the ends of sentences. The best strategy for figuring out where to put punctuation is reading over the writing and noticing when you are pausing. Normally, you pause at a place that makes sense for a sentence to end. Now, you can't rely completely on that. You still want to make sure that where you're putting that punctuation is at the end of a complete sentence. And we know a complete sentence has a subject. That means it tells us who or what is doing an action, and it has a predicate. It's telling us what the subject is doing or what the subject is. So we need both the subject and predicate for it to be a complete sentence, and that is when you put a punctuation at the end. So let's go ahead and read this passage. Mother's Day is coming. It's on a Sunday in May. Why do we celebrate it? We thank our moms for all they do for us. All right, so I noticed a couple places that I paused as I was reading. So when I was reading, I read, Mother's Day is coming. I scooped this chunk over here. And I think a period would make sense at the end of that sentence. Then I read, it's on a Sunday in May. I think a period would make sense there as well. Then I read, why do we celebrate it? And that kind of sounded like a question. So I'm going to have to put a question mark at the end of that sentence. We thank our moms for all they do for us. And I don't know about you, but I feel pretty enthusiastic about my mom. So I think I want to end this sentence with an exclamation point. There we go. So now we have 4 sentences, and it's going to be a lot easier for other people to read, because when there isn't punctuation, then it all looks like one big chunk of words, and it can be really confusing for the reader. And you don't want that, because you've worked so hard to write really great things. So now that we have our punctuation at the end, let's just check a couple of sentences to confirm that we have a complete sentence, that we have a subject and a predicate. So let me change colors to circle the subject in the first sentence. So the first sentence is Mother's Day is coming. So the subject is what the sentence is about. And it sounds like this sentence is about Mother's Day. So that is our subject. I'll put S for subject. And the predicate is what the subject is doing or what it is. So the sentence says Mother's Day is coming. So is coming, that whole thing is the predicate. All right, the next sentence is it's on a Sunday in May. Now this one's a little tricky because it starts with a contraction. It starts with it's, which is it, and is put together to make it's. So the subject is just it. It's just it. And the predicate would actually be is on a Sunday in May. But the reason it's tricky is because we're splitting up it's for the subject and predicate. And the reason we need to do that is because the predicate has to have a verb in it. And in this sentence is that verb. So I'm just going to write it in to help us remember that we did that. I'm going to write P here. This was the P. This was the predicate. And it was the subject. Now I want you to try and figure out the subject and predicate in the last sentence. So we're going to skip this one since it's a question, and let's try and figure out the subject and predicate in we thank our moms for all they do for us. So go ahead and pause and see if you can figure it out. Welcome back. All right, so we thank our moms for all they do for us. The subject is what the sentence is about. In this sentence, we is the subject. We are the ones doing the action. And the predicate would be thank our moms for all they do for us. That whole thing is the predicate. So those were all complete sentences. Now that we have punctuation at the ends of our sentences, we need to go back and make sure we have correct capitalization. So let's start by checking the words at the beginning of our sentences. So in this first sentence, I'm already seeing that the first word is not capitalized. I'm just going to cross it out and write it capital letter. Looking at our next sentence again, nope, they did not capitalize it, which is not surprising since the punctuation wasn't there. The punctuation lets you know that you need to capitalize the next word that starts the next sentence. Let's go to the next one. All of these need to be capitalized. All right, so we've capitalized the first letters of the sentences. Let's see, are there any names we need to capitalize? So there weren't names of people, but there was a name of a day. 2 days, actually. Mother's Day, that's actually a holiday, so you do need to capitalize both parts of it because it's a holiday. And then the other one is Sunday. Sunday is a day of the week that needs to be capitalized. All right, I think we got them all. These are all the letters that need to be capitalized. In this one, there weren't any letters that were capitalized that didn't need to be, but your writing might have some of those as well. So when you're editing, make sure you're looking for letters you might need capitalized and capitalized letters you might need to lowercase, along with, of course, punctuation at the ends of your sentences. You've got this. The final part of our editing process is checking your spelling. So to help you out, I've attached a word wall to today's post, which we've used before. It just got, your number words, color words, some phonic sounds and word endings you can apply to different words. Remind you of bed, so you don't confuse your B and D. And you've got your sight words organized by the alphabet. And some additional things at the end. Oh, and shapes on there. So use this to help you check your spelling. You can also use that strategy that we've practiced of writing a word 3 different ways, using what we've learned in phonics and thinking, which way looks the most right based on all the reading that you've done. I can't wait to read your completed opinion pieces and see, hopefully, maybe some different color pen where you've gone back and revised and edited.